Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim, and Chris. On today's Tour Catch Up,
Pegula powers to her first clay court title,
Sinner speaks in first interview since ban.
and Wimbledon's Henman Hill is set for a makeover as part of 150th anniversary celebration.
Kim, today is the 7th of April, and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ, brought to you by Sports Travel and Hospitality Group. The clay swing is here, and so is the first Masters clay event of the season in Monte Carlo. And we've got lots to talk about at Tennis Weekly HQ, as always. Jessica Pegula captured her first clay crown. The Italians, Darderi and Cobolli, delivered in Europe. And a qualifying wildcard in the name of Jenson Brooksby won out in Houston. Elsewhere, Yannick Sinner has spoken in his first interview since being banned, and there was the news that the top 20 ATP and WTA Tour players have signed an open letter asking for more money from the Grand Slam events. A revamped Henman Hill is also in the works from Wimbledon. So, Kim, there is plenty and plenty to cover in this episode today. And we're going back to the dynamic duo that brought Tennis Weekly and the Passing Shot podcast, let's say, into existence because Chris is on holiday.
Yeah, that's a trip down memory lane there, Joel.
I
The
know.
passing shot, as we
I
were
know.
formerly known. But yeah, Chris is away. He's just sent us a lovely photo on the Tennis Weekly group chat of a nice clay court in the sun in Mallorca.
Ooh.
So he is out playing tennis on the island, but not at Rafa's academy. It has to be said.
Yes,
He's gone to a
controversial.
rival
How
one,
are
I
you
think.
how are you dealing with the news? Is this going to create tension and friction in the camp?
Well, I mean, I thought he'd, support the Rafa Nadal Academy, but I can understand the prices might be a bit high there, and I'm sure he's having a lovely time regardless. So
Maybe
I'll
he's trying
I'll
to
let
look
it
to set up
slide.
his own rival academy,
Well,
Tennis
possibly.
Weekly Academy.
Tennis Weekly Academy. Is that in addition to the Croydon Open we're
Yeah,
planning
exactly.
at
We're
some
we're
point?
going
Yeah.
worldwide. We're going worldwide.
Worldwide.
Yeah,
There we
but
go.
yeah, lots and lots of interesting things. Yeah, Chris sadly not with us, but he will be back. He will be back. And yeah, it's going to be me and Kim today. And before we get into everything, we just want to give another shout out to our sponsors, Sports Travel and Hospitality Group, because if you are looking to go to the French Open and you're not able to get tickets, then you're probably not. You're probably in the same boat as a lot of people because they have now sold out. And the only way to get them, or one of the ways you can still get them, is through the Sports Travel and Hospitality Group. So if you're looking to go to Roland Garros and you want to make a bit of an occasion, a bit of an event for it, then Sports Travel and Hospitality Group have some amazing hospitality packages. We put the link in the description if you want to get involved. So it's there if you would like. But yeah, it's a way to get a great experience, great day out in Paris, Roland Garros, in the sun with the red clay. Oh, I'm excited just thinking about it.
I know we've had a wave of nice weather, haven't we, in the UK, and it does really just make you want to be out there watching live tennis in the sun, and yeah, it definitely gets that appetite going, doesn't it, when you're finally blessed with some good
Mm.
weather. So yeah, definitely the best option now for being there courtside at Roland Garros. And well, let's get on to what's happened in the last week on tour because we've got a whole flurry of tournaments to catch up on, Joel, as you've said, but we've also had some nice things happening, some slightly infactual things potentially as well,
Mm.
because it was April Fool's Day the other day, wasn't it? And as always, there's like a few tennis related jokes that come out, which
And
can sometimes fool us.
and actually we got involved ourselves. I don't know if any of our listeners saw on our social media on Twitter. I don't actually know if anyone was actually genuinely fooled by this, but we suggested or said that Ash Barty was coming out of retirement to reclaim the Australian women's number one ranking from Daria Kasatkina, and she was going to get wild cards into all remaining Grand Slam events plus the WTA Tour finals, and then once she's achieved her objective, she's going to go back to golf. But yeah, it caused quite a bit of stir. Actually, it gained quite a bit of traction. But I'm hoping no one was genuinely fooled by that.
I mean, we've seen players retire young before, go off to do something else, and then come back.
It's
So
true. It's
I
true.
don't think it was an April Fool's that was outside the realm of possibility, but I think the motivation behind it, just to stop Kasatkina being the Aussie number one,
Was that
might
the
have been
giveaway?
questionable.
Was that the giveaway?
It
Yes.
might have been, yeah. But I think there was one that you particularly
Yes.
enjoyed from elsewhere, though, that caught your eye, wasn't
Mm.
there?
Yes, because Yannick Sinner is on his holiday, enforced leave at the moment, and I was just kind of thinking about the Carota boys. What are the Carota boys up to? And they posted that they were actually undergoing a bit of a name change. They were going to become the Carlitos boys, and they put a video on their social media of basically them ripping off the carrot suits, putting them in the bin, and yeah, just having these white t-shirts with Alcaraz's face on it with the Carlitos boys. So yeah, it
Can you
just
imagine what
shows.
Yannick Sinner would have thought? He would have thought his loyal, diehard fans had gone over to the other side. He must
Hey,
have
they've
been
they've got to keep in
gutted.
business. They got to keep in business. They got to.
Professional
Yeah, they've got
fanboys.
to they've got to keep going, even if Sinner's not playing. You've got to go elsewhere. So I can totally understand it, but yeah, no, it wasn't. It was an April Fool's. It was an April Fool's.
What a relief for Yannick Sinner and all his fans. But yeah, I think the Carlitos boys has a ring to it. So maybe there'll be a rival
Oh, a
fan group
rival
set up.
faction.
Yeah,
Interesting.
maybe. Well, I didn't see any April Fools per se, but what I did see this week, Joel, was Gail Monfils did a nice interview with Gilles Simon on his like YouTube channel, and there's some lovely words from Gail about his wife Alina, who, as we know, they're kind of like one of tennis's power couples. But yeah, some really like lovely sentiment towards her, and he actually said that if he hadn't met her, he would probably have retired from the sport already, and he would have called it quits after COVID. Because there's a whole load of it. I recommend anyone to maybe go and check out the interview if you want the full thing. But he really credits all of the help and support that she gave him, during COVID, and all the difficulties he's had over the last few years for kind of keeping going, giving him that motivation. And I just thought it was lovely, lovely words, and a real testament to how that strength of their relationship has kind of probably helped them both, but especially so. And we've been blessed with him having more years on the tour, so we have to thank her as well for that, haven't we? But yeah, I thought it was a really lovely comments there.
Yeah, brought a tear to my eye reading some of the comments, because they've both. I feel like they've both been through a lot, and I think it's fair to say that Monfils is playing some of the best tennis of his career at the moment.
Absolutely.
He's playing some, and I feel like he's determined, he's driven, he's motivated, and I think Lena Svitolina, Lena Monfils is a big part of that.
Absolutely. And it's just lovely comments. And well, I think I'm still waiting for him to get that win over Djokovic, and I do hope that before he retires, he's able to get one win
One win.
over a certain Mr. Djokovic, because we know the head-to-head is completely one-sided. This episode is brought to you by Sports Travel and Hospitality Group,
the leading provider of travel, hospitality, and customer experiences at global sporting events, including this year's Roland Garros.
By booking with Sports Travel and Hospitality Group, tennis fans around the world can witness the pinnacle of the clay court season unfold, all the while indulging in luxurious hospitality that only Roland Garros can provide.
As an official agent of Roland Garros, Sports Travel and Hospitality Group guarantees you unrivaled views from the best seats in the house on Philippe Chatrier, as well as world-class cuisine and beverages served on site.
With Sports Travel and Hospitality Group, you also have access to the matches of your choosing, with 3 package tiers available across the entire tournament.
Learn more and book your Roland Garros hospitality package today at sportstravelhospitality.com/Roland-Garros. That's sportstravelhospitality.com/Roland-Garros.
So what are you waiting for? Secure your premium seat at Roland Garros today for a once-in-a-lifetime Grand Slam tennis experience.
The link is in the description.
But yes, in other news, let's crack on, and we'll move on to all the tournaments that took place last week. We're going to start with Charleston out in the States for the women. It was a 500 outdoor clay event. The biggest North American women's only event, actually. So it's a pretty significant event that happens at this time every year. And yeah, it was Jessica Pegula who won the title, beating fellow American Sophia Kenin in the final in straight sets. It's her first clay court title now for Pegula. So she has done all of the surfaces now with titles on all of them. And she's been really racking up the match wins of late, actually. She's won her second title of the year, and she's at 17 wins from her last 19 matches. So she is one of the main players in form and women to watch at the moment. But what did you make of her performance this week, Joel? She did have a bit of a battle in the second set in the final against Kenin. She came back from 5-1 down to clinch that set 7-5 and avoid going to a third set. But how impressed were you with JPEG this week in Charleston?
I mean, very impressive, I think, to go from, the final Sabalenka in Miami to this, such a quick turnaround. And it shows, I think, regardless of what surfaces it is, if you've got the momentum, if you've got the form, you can carry it through. And in the final against Kenin, in that second set, I mean, it just shows, I think, Pegula on the tour mentally, I think she's one of the coolest and calmest operators on the women's circuit. And I think you need that in those moments where you sort of know what to expect from yourself. And you're kind of putting the pressure on your opponent to go and ultimately go and clinch the set. And, Kenin, admittedly did choke a little bit, but I just think, one of Jessica Pegula's greatest assets, along with her game, is the fact that she can maintain a very steady, approach, calmness, regardless of what situation she finds herself in. And as a result of that, she's able to stay competitive, stay in the match for as long as possible. So that was what I was most impressed with in the final.
Yeah, and it's a shame for Sofia Kenin that she wasn't able to get that second set, because she had 3 set points, and it wasn't able to get them. 5-1, 40-15 up. You must think, I'm going into a third set, can have a break, have a sit down, and then regroup. And let's try and get this now. But yeah, she wasn't able to close it out, and we've seen her getting edgy and like you said, nervous before. It's not like we've never seen it from her, but it's a real shame.
She's not won a tour title in 5 years, and I think that that is something she obviously wants to put right. She's a quality competitor on her day. I think it was unfortunate, she Anna Smova retired in that semi-final, because I was really, really looking forward to that. But she had some good wins this week against Kasatkina in the third round, and Kalinskaya as well. So she had a good run to the final, but perhaps it showed that she's maybe not able quite to get over the finish line. And maybe the longer it goes on, the more it was kind of maybe in her head that maybe this is an opportunity. But it just shows, I think, with Pegula, the form that she's in. Yes, there are a couple of players who still are above her in terms of tennis, like a Sabalenka, but she's firmly, I think, the best of the rest at the moment.
Yeah, and I think she's demonstrated that previously, but what we've always had question marks over is that ceiling, and that sort of cutting edge bit that's going to really elevate her with those matches against the likes of Sabalenka or Swiatek in those finals. And it's great that she's racking up titles like this over opponents like Kenin, where Pegula would have been the favourite and should have won this match. But can she then elevate it higher?
She's world number 3.
Yeah, she's now the new world number 3. And yeah, I think she's number 1 for match wins this season as well, with 25 for the season. So some great stats in her favor there. What I also thought was interesting as well, just on Charleston itself, as well as a tournament, it's going to be offering equal prize money to the ATP 500 events from next season. So obviously this is a WTA 500, but they don't currently offer the same amount of prize money as the ATP 500 events, the equivalent counterparts, but they are doing that from next season, which will be the first WTA 500 event to do so. And it actually, when you sort of look into the history of the Charleston tournament, they have sort of been trailblazers for women's kind of prize money and rights throughout history, really. They were the first women's tennis event to offer $100,000 in prize money. They were the first to be broadcast live on television as well. So I think it's, I just wanted to give the Charleston event a bit of a
Yeah.
shout out because it's obviously nice that they're kind of honouring this. And from next year, it's, I guess, becomes an even more attractive event to play at for the WTA Tour.
And you know what? When I look at the event, it does look like a lovely one to go to, and that big stadium court as well. And it does get me wondering whether it should be a mixed event or a combined event, because I do feel like they've got the stadia maybe to do it as a combined, ATP and WTA like 500, and the fact that they're going to be offering equal prize money from next season, again, I think just adds a lot of credibility to that, because we see other events where there's a big deficit or imbalance between the two. So real kind of trendsetters. And I'd be all for a combined event in Charleston, because I do think it's in a nice spot, a nice transitional spot from players who've played the Sunshine Swing and don't necessarily want to go to Europe straight away, but still want to kind of collect those ranking points. So maybe there's a little bit more that could be done there.
It's sort of on the way back, isn't it? But although my approach, Joel, would be let's not change it for it's a long running women's only event. I think bringing men into the game, it isn't necessarily needed. And I don't know if that would not ruin its legacy in sort of promoting women's, women in sport. But do we need them at this event? Can't they? Maybe they could have a separate one though. I don't know, but we'll see. Listeners, what do you think? But it's been a good event, and obviously a home champion for them. Well, completely dominating in the final with 2 American players in the final, so fantastic for the home crowd there as well, and well done at JPEG. Let's look at Bogota though, because we did have the 250 event out in Colombia, and great for home crowds here as well, because the home player Camila Osorio won this title for the 3rd time here at home in Bogota. Straight sets it was over Polish qualifier Katarzyna Pava in the final. So Osorio picking up her 3rd title out in Bogota. And she's still a way off the record. I think her countrywoman Zuluaga won 4 titles here. So she's still got one more to get to equal that. But she had a bit of trouble getting there though. She did have to save a match point earlier in the week though, against Bektas, but coming through more solidly after that to kind of win comfortably in the final. Any thoughts on Osorio's win in Bogota this week, Joel?
I mean, I think it's always great, I think, for a home player to win in their home event. And I think, to be honest, I think a tournament like Bogota needs it. It feels to me like a real outlier to go play this event in South America, potentially from, like Miami, and then going off to Europe. Feels a little bit more of a detour than anything. And perhaps why, looking at the fields, it doesn't feel particularly strong. So I think it was actually good from the tournament's point of view that the home player won it, because it does feel like there's a big community out in Bogota, and it does get good crowds. But actually, I think the story for me was Cava getting to the final as a qualifier. I wondered if she just sort of ran out of steam, in that final. And Osorio, with the home crowd, you could tell that she was pumped, and she was playing really good tennis. I mean, she defeated Tatiana Maria, who's a 2-time champion herself, in the quarterfinals in straight sets. So, nothing to kind of worry about there. But a good result for her. But I just think this is an odd tournament.
I mean, it's one that, like you said, it thrives off the kind of local home players, I think. And there were a number of kind of wild cards also in the draw as well, none of whom were able to kind of go too much further. But nice for Osorio. She's defended her title. The Colombians are very, very happy, and nice for Cava to have a good week as well. I think she ousted Buzkova, who was the top seed here en route as well.
It honestly makes you think, if we're going to have these sorts of events for the WTA in South America, why not just create a WTA equivalent golden swing that we have on the ATP
alongside
side,
the ATP one?
And maybe make more of like the WTA possibly in South America. I know their kind of focus and efforts feel like they're in Asia and in China, but there's certainly, I think, a big untapped audience out there in South America for the WTA side. And I think, without that sort of infrastructure there, I feel like these tournaments, they're vulnerable, I think, to being taken off the tour because they just feel so much of an outlier, as I said, or a detour, that it's hard to see them kind of fitting in at the moment.
Yeah, I think, Joel, I think you might have a new career as a ATP WTA scheduler coming up.
Tournament strategist. Yeah, I love that.
Logistics guru. But let's have a look at the ATP tournaments, because we had a number of them take place as well. We had an outdoor clay event in Houston last week, which was absolutely dominated by American players. In fact, all 8 quarterfinalists were American. So
wow.
Talk about depth in tennis there. It's really good for the home hopes. I mean, can you imagine if we had that in the UK? With
it'd
British
be great.
Players?
I would be struggling to fill. I think I'd be struggling to fill that quota for the quarterfinals.
Can you name 8 ATP British players? I mean, we probably could, but like in terms of being up there,
is Ryan Peniston still playing
to get in? Yeah, well, exactly. But the one that came out on top in Houston was Jenson Brooksby, who was technically a qualifier here, and had to really
a wild card in qualifying,
fight his way through. Yeah, wild card into qualifier. I don't know why I was saying technically a qualifier. He was a qualifier, but we know that Brooksby, he's been around a few years ago. He had a bad injury and has came back at the start of the season. So culminating in getting the win here is really fantastic for him. Beating Tiafoe in the final in straight set 6-4, 6-2. But I think the real story of this tournament, is Brooksby's grit to get through it. He was down a match point in 3 separate matches en route to the title. That doesn't happen very often, does it, Joel?
No, I mean, it just shows he's so determined. I think a lot of people look at his style and don't necessarily think it's the most eye-pleasing style on the tennis court. It's very kind of quirky, kind of full of its own intricacies. I saw kind of like him at the net doing kind of double-handed backhand volleys at one point. So it is very kind of unique, I think, on the ATP tour. But I'm almost sort of like hypnotized by it, sort of like Daniel Medvedev and the octopus brand of tennis that he has. That it sort of captivates me in terms of how it is working so well for him, and the fact that he was able to kind of come through qualifying and win this tournament, as you said, Kim, with all of these Americans around him, to show that he ultimately was top dog in a field that included Tommy Paul, Tiafoe in the final. You had Nakashima there as well, who's been having a good season. I think is a real, sign of encouragement for him as he comes back from injury and as he goes up the rankings again. And I don't think anyone will care the attractiveness of his tennis if it's producing these results.
Yeah, and he is in fact the only American to have won a title this calendar year so far. So,
are you surprised by that?
The depth that they have, I am a bit, because
it's taken till April to get to an American ATP Tour champion.
Yeah, I would have thought maybe Paul or Fritz might have picked one up, but there are so many of them on the tour. But I guess it's when it matters most, are they getting it done? And I'm sure Brooksby's quite pleased to have that mantle at the moment. It's his very first tour title as well. So yeah, obviously ticking that box as well. And I just think, American tennis, they'll be so pleased with this lineup. It was the first time since 91. That's the year of my birth. It was a long time ago. That's the first time that the eight Americans have filled all the quarterfinal spots at an ATP event. So I think that's one of the main stories from this week. And Brooksby obviously having a bit of a dream run here and fighting his way through. And I think he'll be quite pleased to have had Tiafoe in the final. He's never lost to Tiafoe, so it's a good head-to-head for him to.
And Tiafoe doesn't necessarily have a great record in finals. I still feel like he's got this badge of he come the North American hardcourt swing later in the season around the US Open. That seems to be where he comes alive, and it's a little bit patchy elsewhere in the season. And although he did well here, I think to get to the final, I think he'll be disappointed that it was very tight. It could have gone either way, but he just sort of fell at the last hurdle.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he'll be picking that up because we know he can do more. And he's won this event, in 2023. So he's a former winner at this event. But well done, Jenson Brooksby. Not often that a wild card into qualifying goes on to win an event. So that's, fantastic stuff from him. We've got a couple of other tournaments that did take place last week. We've got the 250 out in Bucharest in Romania. This is the Tiriac Open. And we had Flavio Cobolli winning this one for Italy, beating Sebastian Baez in straight sets in the final 6-4, 6-4. He needed a lot of championship points to get it done, but he did finally do it in just shy of 2 hours. Cobolli, an Italian player that I guess many of us maybe aren't too familiar with. He's not had a great run of form of late, has he? But he's managed to turn that around to win his first tour title out in Romania.
Yeah, he's not been playing. I think he said it himself. Hasn't been feeling confident in his game over the last few months. He's lost in the first round of his last 7 ATP events, and it's a player I sort of associate a little bit more, with the challenger circuit. But his talent is undeniable, particularly I think on the clay. And the fact that he's got his first title, it just shows again. You just spoke about the strength and depth of men's American tennis, but men's Italian tennis is again going from strength to strength. And against Baez in the final, the top seed, he's having a great season. Was doing very well, in the Golden Swing in South America. Very seasoned, experienced clay quarter. To defeat him in straight sets, lovely lob to finish it as well. I feel like this is the Cobolli. Cobolli is back. He's got his confidence. He's got that swagger back. And although there was a little bit of, negotiation at the end to get over the finish line, it just showed that again. I think he's up for the task, and I expect him to continue to rise and be one of those players you don't want to be facing in the European clay swing this season.
Yeah, he's back into the top 40 now. So I suppose, like going, for example, into Roland Garros, he might be just outside the seedings.
Yeah.
Probably not a good first round player for if you are a seeded player. Maybe you don't want to face him the first round of Roland Garros if he's, going to run on from here and perhaps have another few good weeks on the clay. Who knows? But yeah, perhaps one you kind of want to avoid early days of Roland Garros, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's very tricky, and I think with one of the his first serve, I think is something that ensures that he is very solid from the baseline. In the final, he won 74% of points behind his first serve, so it just shows that he is playing with he's playing very well at the moment, and that's starting with a good service game.
Yeah, and this was ATP title number 100 for Italy. And then I think Luciano Darderi then went and won number 101 for Italy in the same week, but this time at the Marrakesh 250. 2 Italians winning on the tour last week, but Darderi coming through against Talon Griegspoor in 2 tie breaks in the final, and getting his second tour title. So it wasn't a maiden victory for him, but quite not exactly like he's a household name racking up the titles. So he'll be very pleased to have won his second title. And another player who's had a pretty rubbish start to the year, bad run of form coming into this event, and then sort of turning it around with some great wins here. And he'll be up to number 48 in the rankings now. So a couple of new sort of Italians rising up, in Sinner's absence. They've, trying to do something for Italy, winning some tour titles. And they've succeeded last week. Yeah,
I mean, it just shows, I think, with the new arrival of a new swing and new surface, it can really change, fortunes, because Darderi came to Marrakesh with a 2-8 tour level record. So, I think I think he liked the quicker courts here, and against Griegspoor in the final, again 2 tie-break sets. I think it came down to who managed the bigger points better. And Griegspoor's been a man in form. He beat Medvedev along the Sunshine Swing, so a good result for him. And I'm still trying to figure out like the pecking order of Italian tennis under Jannik Sinner, because it just feels like there's just a massive melting pot of competitors.
Yeah, we've got obviously Massetti, Berrettini,
Sonego,
who has been, in a Davis Cup quite a lot. Arnaldi, they're like the Americans. They're very quite a lot of depth in Italian tennis.
Are we including Fognini and Simone Bolelli?
They might be on the sort of older twilight years of their career. I mean, Bolelli's still very top in doubles, isn't he? But in terms of singles chances of going forwards. But yeah, they've got great depth. And I mean, Darderi, for those of our listeners who follow the Challenger circuit, he did get to the Naples Challenger final the week before, losing to Capriva, but then getting his revenge on Capriva this week to win in Marrakesh. But he obviously dropping down to the Challenger circuit, picking up some wins there last week, has helped him coming back onto the ATP tour in Marrakesh. So I don't know, that's a good tactic and a good thing to look out for if you're in the business of trying to make predictions. The Challenger circuit is a good place to look at to see who's getting form there. But actually, Joel, talking about Italians in the news, we have had some words from Sinner. Actually, he's been speaking to Sky Italy in the last week. We haven't heard much of him since the ban was announced, but he's been talking to Sky about his feelings, how it was after he learned about the ban. So some interesting comments that have coming out, and sort of saying how fragile he was after everything that happened and how difficult it was, but he's been helped a lot by his friends and family giving him the strength that he needs. And I suppose that most important bit, it was really that he did come out and say he essentially chose the lesser evil, reaching the agreement to have the specified length of ban, rather than holding out, appealing to potentially end up getting a much longer sentence. So I don't think he was pleased with it, but it was kind of the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, it sounded like there was perhaps a little bit of nervousness in the Sinner camp if that they didn't take their punishment now. The longer and longer it went on, the more severe or the worse it could have been. So it was interesting to hear that kind of rationale there of actually, let's just rip the Band-Aid off now, because if we let this kind of simmer, it could get even more difficult. The other thing I also took from it, which was quite interesting, was he said that what he learned, it's good to have people around you that you can trust. I've learned that even more in recent months. And again, I think it shows that if you're a top player and you have these big entourages and these big squads that are here to kind of support you, they are an embodiment of yourself, and you need to be able to trust them 110% with your career and your profession. And if you don't have that trust or that confidence in that person, then you should not have them in your team, because it could lead potentially to situations like this. So I think it just shows that when you're a big player, there is so much to think about with the people you bring into your team, because the potential scenarios of what could happen are there for everyone to see if it doesn't go right.
Yeah, you're so reliant on everyone around you. And we've seen it in so many cases now with like Simona Halep, for example. It's it can be what someone's giving you, how they're treating you. You've got to kind of be in control of all of that. So yeah, definitely,
especially if you just want to focus, you need to focus on the tennis as a tennis player and leave everything else up to the specialists of whatever field they're in. But as I say, without that trust, you just need it. It's a given. And I think, it's a hard lesson for, I think, Sinner to take, but it's certainly one that he will be making sure that it's a lesson learned going forward.
Yeah, for sure. And it was nice to hear from him, though. He'll be looking forward to returning in Rome, and it'll be interesting to see how he does return and what the reception is like. But let's take a very quick break now. Do join us in the second half, where we'll be discussing the top 20 ATP and WTA players, their open letter to Grand Slams asking for more money, Wimbledon's Henman Hill revamp, and we'll also be looking ahead to the first clay Masters event of the season out in Monte Carlo. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, brought to you by Sports Travel and Hospitality Group. And it's time, as always, to kick off the second half with another game. Joel, it's just me this week to play. So
are you slightly
I'm
relieved Chris is not here?
Well, I'm relieved that I'm going to, I guess, not lose to Chris, but I might overall, as a team effort, struggle. So let's see. What have you got for me and our listeners?
So I know last week my path of the courts for you and Chris was quite difficult, and there was a lot of kind of caveats going on. So for this week, I've gone for a similar theme, but I have simplified it for you and our listeners. And the category I've got for you is up to and including Miami. There are now 9 male players who have won one Masters 1000 title from 2020 onwards. Who are they?
Oh, so that's a good sort of 5 seasons worth.
Yes.
5 and a bit seasons, isn't it?
So single Masters 1000 title champions on the ATP side since 2020. And there's 9 in
I've
total.
got a couple to start with.
Okay.
I think I can get about a third of them at least.
I'm going to set par at... I'm going to set par at... I'm going to say 5.
Okay.
Over
and just to
50%.
clarify, they might have potentially be people that have won a Masters in like 2017, but they've just only won one from 2020.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
So they could have won Masters titles before this decade, and they could be on the list.
Okay, fabulous. Right, I've got my first answer for you then, Joel.
Okay.
Jakub Mensik, starting with the most recent.
That is correct. Yes, very good. Jakub Mensik on the list. Bonus points also if you can tell me the event that it was at.
Oh, Miami 2025. Jack Draper, Indian Wells 2025.
That is correct. Yes, Jack Draper is on the list. So that's 2 correct answers.
And I shall continue with the British theme and say Cameron Norrie, Indian Wells 2021.
Yeah, there or thereabouts.
COVID year.
Correct answer. Yeah, Cam Norrie, Indian Wells. So that's 3. So 2 more to reach par score this week.
I'm going to say Taylor Fritz because he won Indian Wells in 2022, perhaps.
Taylor Fritz is a correct answer. Very good, Kim. So that's 4. You need 1 more to reach par score.
I think this player has only won 1. I hope he's not won 2. I mean, it's great for him if he has, but for the purposes of this game, Holger Rune, he won Paris in 2022, something like that.
Holger Rune?
2023, maybe.
It's a correct answer. Very good. Well done. Well done. Well done. That's 5. So you've achieved par for this week. Any other names?
I was going to say Grigor Dimitrov. Did he win one of the North American ones?
Dimitrov. I'm
Toronto.
glad you didn't say Grigor Dimitrov because Grigor
is it
Dimitrov's
wrong?
not on the list.
No.
No,
He did get to a
not on the
final though,
list.
didn't he? I think.
Yep. Any other guesses?
Oh gosh.
There's one big name, Kim. One big name that you would be kicking yourself if you did not
Rafa.
give to me. Yes, Rafael Nadal. Can you tell me which Masters event he won?
Would it be
Monte Carlo?
Monte Carlo again?
Maybe, yeah. But yeah, Rafael Nadal is on the list.
Okay, fantastic. Because he would have won one in the first part of that period.
Yes. But here's the full list. So as I said, you had Rune, Norrie, Nadal, Mensik, Draper, Taylor Fritz. Here's some of the names you didn't get. Pablo Carreño Busta.
Wow. Okay. PCB.
Yeah, PCB. Borna Coric.
Oh yeah, he went on that run, didn't he?
Yeah. So Draper, Fritz, Mensik, Nadal, Norrie, Rune, and one more. Alexei Popyrin.
Of course, that was
Alexei
last year
Popyrin,
as well.
Yeah.
In the summer. North America.
That was your 9. So yes.
Thank you, Joel. Listeners, let us know how you got on. Did you meet par as well? I think I did better in that than I thought initially I was going to do. So thank heavens for that. But I think maybe I would have struggled with Chris here as well, taking some of my answers. I don't know. But yes, thanks very much, Joel, for putting that one together. And let's dip into the mailbag now, because we do have a question from Jack Percival, who got in touch with us on Instagram. So thanks very much, Jack, for reaching out to us. It was lovely to read your message, and thanks for your kind words. But Jack is asking our thoughts on essentially on electronic line calling on clay court events. So he's basically saying he's really intrigued with the ATP's video explaining electronic line calling on clay courts from a while ago. I think that's referring to the Fox 10 software that was developed. With the Charleston Open set to become the first WTA clay tournament to use electronic line calling technology, I'm curious about your thoughts on this transition. Given the traditional reliance on inspecting ball marks for line calls on clay, how do you think players and officials will deal with this challenge? I can imagine more players becoming a bit Ostapenko-like with their lack of trust of the technology when the marks the balls leave can tell a different story than where they actually landed. So yeah, great question, Jack. Thanks so much for reaching out with that. For reference, the Charleston Open were using electronic line calling this week, just gone. They were using the traditional kind of Hawkeye system that we typically know from hard and grass courts, rather than the Fox 10 system that the ATP were kind of pioneering. Joel, I'm going to come to you, obviously, first. Chris isn't here. What's your opinion on this? I mean, how do you feel it went down in Charleston? Do you think it's going to cause issues when this is unrolled on more events?
I think
on the clay.
I think it overall it went well, and the thing with Hawkeye is that the reason it works for hard and grass courts is because it's a flat surface, and the problem with clay is that because of dust and build up, ultimately it's an uneven surface, and that's why it's taken more time to get this right, or to get this technology in place. In terms of how I think kind of players and officials react, I think it's going to create a more absolute decision, and as a result of that, we're going to have less stoppages in play. I think we're going to have less kind of conflabs around marks and lots of people pointing at spots on a tennis court. So from that point of view, I think to be honest, umpires will feel probably a sense, in some aspects, a sense of relief that they're not going to have to get down from their chairs and go and point to a spot. So that's almost kind of like one thing off their plate. I do think though that there are going to be players who, regardless of what I see as an improvement in the technology, are going to be questioning its reliability. People like Ostapenko. I'm sure there are others as well, but certainly I think having this technology in place is a good step forward. But I think for me the challenge is that without the credibility, for example, of having something like this at a Grand Slam, I think maybe there's always going to be that seed of doubt of like, well, yeah, it might be okay for a WTA Tour event out in Charleston, but if it's not good enough for something like the French Open, or the French Open aren't using it, then yeah, I'm not quite sure like how much to believe it is potentially maybe a seed of doubt that players might have.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that we're gonna have to introduce slowly though, bit by bit, to get players like warmed up to it and to play at events where they do have it, and to maybe not have a great injustice thrust upon them for them to kind of get their buy-in. And I think even with a mark and on the court and an umpire coming down, there's going to be lack of reliability with a human perspective, as well as possible flaws with technology. So is anything ever 100% foolproof? What is the kind of standard of proof we need to kind of live with and accept that there's perhaps always going to be something that is slightly not 100%? But yeah, I think it needs a bit of time. I do think though that the Fox 10 approach, which is much more, I guess, tailor-made for clay courts, that's the technology to go
like
down,
photographic,
the standard one. Yeah, it shows like a live image of where the ball has struck the court, whereas the traditional Hawkeye system is really more for kind of courts that are completely flat, whereas obviously a clay court has, they try and smooth it out, but it's not completely flat, is it? So yeah, it's sort of, I think it's a really tricky one. I can see totally what Jack's getting at. I think there are going to be some players who really are against it. But I think they're going to have to
accept it.
Majority, and they're going to have to accept it and adapt. With other changes that come in. And I think in years to come, we'll probably be wondering why we never had this. And it's like the adaptations that came in during COVID. some of them have stuck around and we don't think anything of it now.
Yeah, and I think it will hopefully create less confrontations maybe between players and umpires on the tennis court. As I say, like having an absolute decision, on a big screen, at least it's something instant and you can process it and and move on without that kind of seed of doubt. As I say, it can help, I think, speed up tennis greatly, and I think that's a benefit to everyone, not just kind of the players and the umpires, but also for the spectators as well.
Yeah, it's clearer for the fans, isn't it? Both at home and watching it live as well. But yeah, thanks, Jack, for your very thought-provoking question. Keep them coming. Listeners, let us know if you've got any burning questions or comments you want us to respond to. And in the news as well, Joel, this week, we've had some prize money related news. So the top 20 players from the men's and women's tours have all clubbed together to send a letter to the Grand Slams asking for greater prize money from the events. So they this has been reported in L'Equipe, a French newspaper, that they want a bigger share of the prize money at Grand Slams. Kind of interesting, this one. I mean, I know there's been a lot in the news lately. We talked at length about the lawsuit that the PTPA have launched recently as well, which is, another player body. This is kind of a separate thing. Do you think they've got, a valid point? Do you think that the top players at these events are not getting enough prize money?
Yeah, I think it's right in the sense that they need to be part of the conversation, always kind of pushing for themselves, and clubbing together to do that. Like, yeah, I totally get it. These Grand Slams are big business events. They're there to make money, and it feels like some of the things that they are doing or have done over the last few years are ways for them to make more money. For example, the French Open introducing night sessions so that they can have double tickets on each day. So I think maybe they're seeing things like that and being like, hang on, these tournaments are making lots and lots of money, and we are the masterpiece, we are the attraction. And certainly I think they've got valid kind of point of argument from that perspective. I think where it falls down for me a little bit is the fact that it's the top 20 players. And I would almost argue that I think for the benefit of the tour or the greater good, it shouldn't just be closed to that. It should be, the top 50 or the top 100, because I think, the general narrative over the last few decades has been around increasing the prize money, in those kind of first rounds and those second rounds and those players ranked lower. And I think that should have been where it comes from, not just the top 20 players, because these players are performing well. These players are getting the prize money. They're getting the sponsorship deals that can help them have these big, teams and entourages. And I would like to see that a little bit more kind of filtered through lower down, because that will create a more competitive tour, a healthier tour. And, looking at this situation, it's almost like the worry is if they do this and like the tournaments agree, it could create an even bigger imbalance between, as I say, this top 20 and the rest of the field.
Yeah, it needs to be an increase for all of them, doesn't it? Every player involved. It has been going up, in recent years, the total prize pot, but there's, hundreds and hundreds of players involved in those Grand Slams. So just to kind of pigeonhole it into the top, I don't think would be very fair. So I do hope that this cohort of players, they're respective of that and kind of acknowledging that. And, maybe it's been slightly taken out of context and they kind of, I don't know, do want it to go wider. But I think we can't have a situation where it's only increasing at the top, because that just, is only going to lead to increasing inequality in the sport. Do you think, Joel, that they're just kind of, they've written a letter? Do you think they would take it any further than that? Do you think it's going to be anything more than that? Yeah. Or just kind of like a polite ask at this stage?
It feels like a polite ask at this stage. And it's really hard to see, how this could be escalated. I just, can't see a situation, for example, where these top players are going to boycott playing Grand Slams because they're not getting even more money. So again, I was a little bit kind of like confused in terms of okay, they've written this letter, but where does it go from here if the Grand Slams sort of politely, decline it? I think people are always naturally, no matter how much money I think people have, just naturally, I think people always want more money. And I think it's more of a case of just making sure that in the conversations when, these tournaments, are doing all these things that are making more money, cost of living is going up as well. That they're still there and they're still reminded. And it does bring me back to that point on like the PTPA. Like, is this like a new group, like a separate group, a top 20 kind of group? It feels very confusing at the moment, I think, with, you've got a PTPA that's sort of set up for players. You've got the Players Council, which is the player group within the structures. And then you're getting these kind of situations where, it's like I don't want to say like a rebel group, but it's like a cutoff group that have kind of signed this letter from the ATP and WTA. It feels very, very clouded and confused at the moment. And there's no kind of obvious channel, I think, that can go down that can make this feel more persuasive and influential. For example, being backed by its own body. Just having 20 players clubbed together and asking politely, it doesn't feel like it carries as much weight as maybe they think it does.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see how it develops, if there's any official response and in where it goes from there. In other news, Joel, we do have some exciting announcements from Wimbledon. They are planning from 2027 to expand Henman Hill. That will be for the 150th anniversary of the very first championships back in 1877, if I'm doing the maths right. Yes, I think that is correct. But yeah, Henman Hill is
getting a roof.
It's getting a rename. Yeah, it's gonna be like Sports Hall. No, it's getting a revamp. It's going to be remodeled. It's going to become more accessible. There's going to be extra seating. There's going to be a pergola for rain cover and shade. So yeah, it's lots of things happening. I had a look through. I'm sure some of our listeners will have seen this being announced as well on social media. I quite like the plans. I think anything to make the site more accessible and provide that extra space for fans to come together is a great move in my book. What are your thoughts, Joel? Do you often spend much time on the hill when you're at Wimbledon? Are you too busy in your, sort of fancy hospitality and lounges for that?
Well, I will say, when I speak to my friends who go to, Wimbledon, when they can, or they're looking to go to Wimbledon, Henman Hill is one of the biggest attractions that any regular punter can go. Even if you've got centre court or you're on a ground pass, people just love spending time on the hill, watching on the big screen, having a Pimm's with some strawberries and cream, and just making it bigger. I think is going to enable more people to have that opportunity. I think going to it over the last few years, it does feel like it's always packed and it's always a little bit cramped, and you're always sort of on that stairwell next to it being ushered on by like security staff. So the fact that they're going to make it bigger, I think, is really exciting. And I also do like the fact that they're going to be providing more rain cover and shade with this pergola, because that is the one thing I always kind of think about when I'm on that hill, is that you are exposed to the elements, and that could be bad sunburn, that could be the rain under a brolly. So I like that they're bringing more kind of covering to it, because I think if there is one thing that it's missing at the moment, it's that.
Yeah, and it's quite steep. I think they're going to reduce the steepness, and you've got to sort of find a space and sit on the steps and get a sore bum. So it's hopefully going to be a more comfortable space.
But will it be called Henman Hill in 2027, Kim? Because Raducanu, Jack Draper. I feel like this is just a recurring topic we always have on the podcast of what it's going to be called. I saw Draper's Dip. Or maybe Draper's...
That sounds like he's had a bad run in form.
Yeah, or Draper's Descent, I feel like, because of the gradient at the moment, maybe going
Draper's
downwards.
Dune, put some sand on it, maybe. Yeah, well, I mean, I would like it to always be called Henman Hill. I think that just is, or just the hill, I suppose, is a player neutral one.
Just that's like the easy way out. Just no player. Just the hill.
But yeah, I'm excited to see it in 2 years' time, and we'll enjoy the last few renditions of the old hill as it is, with knowing that we've got some exciting developments to come. Talk about exciting. We've got our first Masters 1000 event on the clay this week in Monte Carlo. Beautiful, beautiful setting.
Yes, one of your favorites.
Tournament. One of my favorites. I haven't been for a long time, but it's just such a stunning setting. And yeah, we've got all the, most of the top players there. Obviously, Sinner's still out, but Zverev, Alcaraz, Djokovic, Tsitsipas, etc., all there, Casper Ruud, Rublev. So some former champions in the field. What are your thoughts? What are you expecting from the first clay Masters of the year, Joel?
Oh, it's a really tough one. It feels really, really open because, obviously we've got no Sinner. I think Alcaraz is still searching for a bit of form, and we've got that kind of new addition of, Menchik and Draper into the mix. I mean, Jack Draper with a 5 next to his name as the 5th seed for a Masters 1000 event is very exciting and very, very new to me. So I think it's really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how the top players do. And I am looking at Jack Draper in terms of, can he continue his form from the hard courts onto the clay, because he's not necessarily had the greatest results on clay, but in terms of his game, I don't see why he shouldn't, be able to translate that. So I'm sort of looking at him in that bottom half. He's got Marcos Giron first up, so kind of curious about that. Novak Djokovic as well. Can he get his 100th title in in Monte Carlo? I mean, that would be a beautiful place to reach a century.
Yeah, and a place where he lives as well. So I'm sure he'll be hoping for that. I mean, any thoughts on your finalists? I'm not gonna go for Novak.
Okay.
I'm gonna go for Casper Ruud and Tsitsipas as my finalists.
Yeah, I mean, Tsitsipas, he does play well
this event
at Monte Carlo, doesn't he? I am gonna go for. Oh, it's tough. I'm going to go Djokovic versus... Oh, will Alcaraz get to the final? I don't know. Let's go Djokovic-Alcaraz. Djokovic-Alcaraz in my final. Yeah. That would be a fitting final, I think. I think that would be
a great final. Yeah.
Everyone would love to see, but yes.
Well, let's watch this space. We've also got, aside from the clay out in Monte Carlo, the Billie Jean King Cup qualifiers. So there are 6 hosts across the world, 3 teams in each. So a range of different events going through. Italy and China are already into the finals, which are taking place in China this year. That's because they are the defending champions and finalists from last year. Great Britain are in The Hague in the Netherlands. We're in a group with Germany and the Netherlands. Raducanu is not playing, and I think elsewhere Świątek has pulled out as well for Poland's tie, which is also being held at home in Poland. Any thoughts on Team GB? Do you think we're gonna be all right without Emma Raducanu? She was very strong for GB in the last tie, wasn't she? And obviously she's been having some good wins of late. But any thoughts?
I was going to ask you, are you disappointed Raducanu's not playing for GB, or do you think that's fair enough? I mean, I know she's had a good run. She had a good, very good run out in Miami. I would have liked to have seen her kind of kick on. It's on the clay as well here. I think it could be a nice, event to,
ease yourself into the clay season.
I know there's a lot of pressure and a lot of expectation, but I would have liked to have seen her kind of go to this as opposed to back to a training block, back to her team. Because I think without her, I think we're going to struggle to qualify, if I'm being quite honest.
Yeah, I think Raducanu being the most in form of the British girls, we needed her, but I know it's not happened yet. Katie Boulter and co may well, get us through. But yeah, I'm slightly disappointed, but I can understand her reasoning. And it's always that kind of common scenario, like, do I put myself first, or do I, do I put country first? And, it's not like she's not played Billie Jean King Cup before. It's she has her reasons, and it's got to depend on her circumstances at that given time. So we'll have to adapt and continue without her in The Hague this coming week.
Indeed, we will.
Yes. We'll be back next week, though, won't we, to round up on Monte Carlo, on the Billie Jean King Cup qualifiers, and any other news that comes out in the meantime about, all sorts of things, prize money, developments of sites, you name it. It'll be here on Tennis Weekly.
Yes, you name it. It will be here. We will be discussing it to the bitter end at Tennis Weekly HQ. But indeed, that wraps up our latest catch up here. We hope you've enjoyed the ride with us. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss a moment of the ATP and WTA action. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and all your favorite podcasting platforms out there. And if you love what you're hearing, then be sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube.
And stay connected with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and X at Tennis Weekly Pod as our handle. And if you want to get in touch with the show, you can do so on all of our social channels. You can drop us an email alternatively at tennisweeklypod@gmail.com, or visit our website at tennisweekly.co.uk. And don't forget, you can still grab your official Tennis Weekly merchandise at etsy.com/shop/Tennis Weekly Podcast.
And we'll be back next week for another talk catch up brought to you by Sports Travel and Hospitality Group. But until then, it's goodbye from Kim.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on Tennis Weekly.